Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm John Holdren, President Obama's Science and Technology Advisor and Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the White House. Delighted you're all here. Thank you for coming. I see a great many familiar faces in the audience, as well as some new ones, and we're happy to have you all here. I think this is a terrific day for the intersection of science and public policy, which is what so many of us work on here in the government and outside of it. We're here to release what I think is by far the most up-to-date, comprehensive, and authoritative assessment of climate change impacts on the United States. It is focused, number one, on what is already happening, and number two, on what is expected to happen going forward under both low-emission scenarios where this country and the world elect to take serious measures to reduce the pace and magnitude of climate change, and under higher emission scenarios in which we don't. The report is written, and I hope you've all got copies. There is both the main report here, a voluminous but nonetheless accessible document, and a summary of about 20 pages, which contains the highlights. It's all written in plain language, intended to be accessible to policymakers, decision makers at all levels, members of Congress, governors, local officials, and of course, citizens who are concerned about these matters. It's got a very practical focus. It's looking at the current and projected impacts region by region, talking about climate change where people experience it in their own front and backyards, and talking about the various sectors that are affected, energy, water, health, agriculture, transportation, and so on. It is based on the latest available information, I think through December 2008. That was the cutoff. And it has new and updated information about climate science, including information that became available after the 2007 assessment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And it was produced under interagency auspices, the auspices of the U.S. Global Change Research Program, USGCRP, which consists of some 13 science-based departments and agencies. Those include the Departments of Agriculture, Commerce, Defense, Energy, Health and Human Services, Interior, State, and Transportation, as well as the EPA, NASA, the National Science Foundation, the Smithsonian Institution, and the U.S. Agency for International Development. The co-authors, some of whom you will hear from, included top scientists from all of those government agencies, as well as from major universities and other research institutions that do work in the domains of climate change and the impacts of climate change. The report underwent extensive public review and peer review. It was reviewed by a 13-member blue ribbon panel of experts, as well as undergoing intensive review in all of the GCRP agencies which I mentioned, the Office of Management and Budget, my office, the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and the Council on Environmental Quality. I think it's important to emphasize that this is not a partisan document, very much a nonpartisan document developed under both Republican and Democratic administrations. It draws on the 21 synthesis and assessment products of the U.S. Climate Change Science Program developed over a period of more than a decade. It also draws on other peer-reviewed scientific assessments, including one I already mentioned, the report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, but also the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment, a variety of National Academy of Sciences reports, and other assessments that looked at regional effects of climate change and their consequences. I want, without any further ado, having said that much about the basics of the report and how it was produced, to turn the podium over to my friend and colleague Jane Lubchenco, who is the Undersecretary of Commerce and the head of NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. She's going to talk for a few minutes about the main substantive elements of the report before turning the floor over to the lead scientist authors who will talk in even further detail about the specific findings. So, Jane.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone. This is indeed a very special day. It's a day on which we are here to share a report that is both relevant and providing information to decision makers and to the American public. Because NOAA was the lead agency for this report, it's my pleasure to, on behalf of the entire government and scientific enterprise, extend a very deep thank you to all of the authors of the report, the 31 authors, as well as the hundreds of reviewers around the country who participated in and made this report possible. They have had years of hard work and dedication, not only to synthesize the science, but to make the information accessible and understandable and relevant to the kinds of decisions that are being made today. So on behalf of all of us, I thank those of you who were involved in this report. NOAA is pleased to be a leader in the Global Change Research Program, as John mentioned, a coalition of 13 federal agencies. Our successful collaboration with major universities and research institutions throughout the country and through Canada have resulted in the 21 synthesis products which have provided information that went into the report that we are releasing and celebrating today. This report, do I control these slides here? Yes. We didn't.
Jan,
yes.
Control back there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We'll get this system worked out. This report will help address the questions that you see here on this slide. I think it's important to highlight, first and foremost, the bottom line of the report. First and foremost, human-induced climate change is a reality. Not only in remote polar regions and in small tropical islands, but every place around the country in our own backyards. Climate change is happening. It's happening now. It's not just a problem for the future. We're beginning to see its impacts in our daily lives. More than that, humans are responsible for the changes that we are seeing, and our actions now will determine the extent of future change and the severity of the impacts. So another major conclusion of the report is that it's not too late to act. Decisions made now will determine whether we get big changes or small ones. Substantially cutting heat-trapping pollution will result in less climate change and smaller impacts. Earlier cuts in emission would have a greater effect than cuts later. This is very powerful information, and it's documented in the report with substantive information about specifics and regionalized to the country. This report looks at how climate change is already changing and how it's already beginning to affect our lives. It also examines projections of future climate change and the impacts on every region of the country and many different aspects of our lives. We're also reporting today with greater confidence than ever before that human activities are the main cause of the changes that we see underway. Today we're going to show you a sampling of the kinds of climate changes and resulting impacts from selected regions around the country, and obviously the full report has greater richness and more examples. Next one, please. This report provides timely information to inform decision making. This information is needed now around the country as we move into an era of increased awareness about the realities of climate change and begin to take climate change into account in making decisions. This is true for planning for power plants, coastal development, water resources, building codes, insurance plans, etc. And the kind of decisions that this report is intended to inform are made certainly by members of local, state, and federal government, but also by business people, farmers, engineers, and others. All of those individuals need to have access to the most current and reliable information which this report provides. Throughout the report, we looked at the differences in impacts between lower emissions and higher emissions. While the higher emissions scenarios are a continuation of recent trends, it's critically important to recognize that trends are not destiny. If we take immediate and sustained action to reduce heat-trapping pollution, we can in fact avoid the most severe impacts that we will be discussing today. So this report gives Americans information that they need to better understand the consequence of decisions about both reducing the emissions as well as adapting to a climate-changed world. It's now my pleasure to introduce one of the lead authors of the report, my colleague and NOAA scientist, Tom Karl, who will talk about the science and the key findings of the report. Tom?
Thank you, Dr. Lubchenco. As Dr. Lubchenco has noted, a key finding of this report is that climate change is happening now. We've already observed changes in many aspects of the climate, and we've documented these changes, and I just want to identify a few of the important changes we've seen. U.S. average temperature has risen by 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit over the last 50 years. We've had more rain coming in heavy downpours that can lead to flooding. Less winter precipitation is falling as snow, more as rain, so there's less snowpack in the mountains, and it melts earlier in the spring. These changes alter the amounts and timing of river flows, making less water available in the summer. Last, but certainly not least, sea level has risen along U.S. coastlines. Some places are seeing much greater rise than others, and similar regional differences are expected in the future. And there's other changes we've observed. For example, glaciers in the Mountain West are melting. Permafrost is thawing. Glaciers in Alaska are also melting. Not only have these changes been observed and documented in the U.S., every one of them has been shown to be linked to human activities, namely the increase in heat-trapping gases caused by the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, gas. Across the country, the growing season is about 2 weeks longer, primarily due to spring arriving later. Now, that may sound like a good thing, and in some ways it is. There are both positive and negative impacts, but overall, most of the impacts will be negative. This is true partly because we designed and built our infrastructure for the climate we've had, not the climate we're going to have. For example, we've designed our water systems for temperature and precipitation patterns of the past century, and those patterns are now changing. We've built our coastal cities along the existing shoreline, not anticipating sea level to rise by a couple feet this century. Another reason most of the changes will be detrimental is because of the rate of change. If climate changes slowly, there's a better chance that society and natural systems can adapt. But climate change is now changing at an unnaturally fast rate, and the projections are even for a more rapid rate of change if heat-trapping emissions are not curtailed. Let's look at temperature. The world has already seen, on average, about 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit of warming during the past 50 years. And we're expecting between 2 and 11.5 degrees of additional warming this century. These temperature increases are expected to be at the lower end of this range if heat-trapping pollutants are substantially reduced. They'll end up near the upper end of the range if emissions continue to grow as they have been. The chart in back of me shows observed and projected increase in global average temperature under 3 different emission scenarios. None of these take into account any policy changes designed to address climate change. The lower one is not a best case. Aggressive reductions in emissions now could put us on a path to less warming than shown here. However, the highest is also not a worst case. In fact, recent emissions have been higher than those assumed in the highest scenario shown here. That means staying the current course could raise global temperatures as much as 11.5 degrees. This could even be higher in the U.S. because U.S. temperatures are projected to warm more than the globe as a whole. And speaking of higher temperatures, one of the ways we'll see temperatures increase will be in the number of very hot days. The maps show the number of days per year over the coming decades when the temperature will exceed 100 degrees. Higher emissions of heat-trapping pollutants result in more temperature rise and many more days above 100 degrees, as shown on the map on the top right. For example, an area in Texas that now sees 10 to 20 days per year over 100 degrees, by the end of this century, under a high emission scenario, will experience more than 100 days over 100 degrees. This kind of extreme heat will have major impacts on the economy, our health, and well-being. Our health will be directly affected by more very hot days and heat waves. Extreme heat waves, which are currently rare, will become much more common in the future. And at the same time, the U.S. population is aging, and older people are more vulnerable to extreme heat. Increases in heat-related illnesses and death are projected in cities across the nation, especially under high emission scenarios. For an example, an analysis of heat waves in Chicago finds about a 10-fold increase in heat-related deaths by late this century under a high emission scenario. But there are success stories regarding adaptation to heat waves. For example, Philadelphia has implemented a successful plan for reducing the risk of death during heat waves that has already saved lives. The city of Chicago is working to reduce urban heat by using green roofs and planting trees. Now, in addition to rising temperatures, we've seen significant changes in precipitation as well. One of the most important changes we've seen across the nation is that more rain is coming in the form of heavy downpours. There are fewer light rains and more heavy rains in every region. An important message from the map is that the heaviest storms are even heavier than before. You can see that the largest percent increases in the heaviest downpours have taken place in the Midwest and the Northeast. So it's no surprise that we've seen some record flooding there. And we understand why warming leads to these heavy and extreme precipitation events. Higher temperatures mean more evaporation, putting more water vapor in the air, and then when a storm comes along, all this additional water vapor is dumped in that storm in the form of a heavy downpour. We have observed longer, drier periods between downpours. A warmer world tends to have more dry extremes and wet extremes. This pattern is projected to continue, with higher emissions meaning greater increases in the heaviest downpours. Across North America, the pattern of precipitation will change. The maps show projected changes in precipitation by season for the late century under a continuation of business as usual. Projected increases in precipitation are shown in blue, decreases are shown in brown. There is good confidence in the general pattern of these changes, with the north getting more precipitation, the south getting less. What we're not so sure about is the precise location of the transition between these two zones. For example, in the southwest, we should expect to see large decreases in precipitation in the spring. Couple that with increased evaporation, more water evaporated from plants or lost from plants, and reduced snowpack and river runoff, we can expect the Southwest to see more droughts. Dr. Melillo, carry on with the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Tom. I'll begin by talking about agriculture. In the context of climate variability and change, agriculture has long been considered one of the most adaptable sectors of our economy. Farmers, after all, are problem solvers. Nonetheless, climate change is projected to pose a variety of new challenges to both crop and livestock production. Important among these climate-related challenges for crop production is the management of insect pests, disease pathogens, and weeds. Rising temperatures allow both insects and pathogens to expand their ranges northward. Some areas, such as the upper Midwest, are experiencing rapidly rising winter temperatures. That means that larger numbers of insects escape being killed by extreme cold, and so their populations grow. These climate-related problems with insects and pathogens mean that more pesticides or other means of pest control will be needed. Besides rising temperatures, increasing carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere will also affect agriculture in both positive and negative ways. Rising carbon dioxide generally increases plant growth as long as there is also a sufficient supply of both water and nutrients. Some of the most serious impacts of climate change will result from rising sea level and the associated loss of coastal lands. One of the important new findings in this report is an updated estimate of how much sea level is projected to rise in this century as a result of warming. Since IPCC's 2007 report was published, new research has estimated considerably greater sea level rise, up to 3 to 4 feet by late this century. The map on the screen shows what Florida would look like with this amount of sea level rise. Everything in red is underwater, including the Florida Keys, Everglades National Park in the south, much of the Cape Canaveral area in the east, and the barrier islands, such as those in the Sanibel area on the west coast. Sea level rise is already underway. We have documented an average of 8 inches of sea level rise in the past 50 years, and this rate has been accelerating. Warming causes sea level rise for 2 reasons. One is that water expands as it warms. The second is that glaciers and ice sheets add water to the oceans as they melt. Recent observations confirm that glaciers worldwide are retreating and the Greenland ice sheet is shrinking. Sea level rise will not be the same in all places, however. Several other factors affect it. One of these is how much the land is either rising or sinking. In places where the land is subsiding or sinking, such as along the Atlantic and Gulf coasts, local sea level rise will be considerably greater. Rising sea level is already eroding shorelines, drowning wetlands, and threatening buildings and infrastructure in some coastal areas. Hurricanes combine with rising sea level to increase these threats. The destructive power of Atlantic hurricanes has increased in recent decades as sea surface temperatures have risen. It is likely that hurricane intensity will increase in the future in response to ongoing warming. In addition, hurricane wind speeds and rainfall are projected to increase as temperature rises. Now let us focus on how sea level rise is putting the Gulf Coast at risk. In this region, about 2,400 miles of roadways and 250 miles of freight rail lines are at risk of permanent flooding over the next 50 to 100 years. Coastal areas are also major centers for economic activity. 6 of the nation's top 10 freight gateways will be threatened by sea level rise. 7 of the 10 largest ports are located on the Gulf Coast. The region is also home to the U.S. oil and gas industry, and 2/3, that is 2/3 of all of the U.S. oil imports, are transported through this region. To sum up, the region's vital energy and transportation infrastructure will be at risk with expected sea level rise and associated storm surge. As temperatures rise, there will be important changes in the character of each region. Let us take the Northeast as an example. As nights in the Northeast have continued to warm, the center of maple syrup production has shifted from the U.S. into Canada. Production depends on a combination of cold nights and warm days. Under higher emissions, maple trees are expected to decline dramatically in the Northeast, perhaps spelling the end of maple sugaring altogether in this part of the U.S. In addition, many fruits grown in the Northeast, including apples and cranberries, require a certain amount of winter chilling. As winters warm, large portions of the Northeast are likely to become unsuitable for growing these fruits. Many winter recreation opportunities like ice fishing, skiing, snowmobiling, and the like will disappear with rising temperatures. Those losses will affect the region's economy and its quality of life. In addition, native cold water fish species will also decline amid rising temperatures and changes in seasonal stream flows. The bottom line is this: climate change already is affecting the things that we value. These impacts will grow, especially if emissions continue unchecked. There are several emerging issues for which this science is rapidly developing. We discuss these issues in our report and acknowledge that we still have much to learn. One example is the acidification of ocean waters resulting from the excess carbon dioxide being taken up by these waters. This threatens corals and shellfish that form their skeletons and shells from calcium carbonate. Coral reefs are an excellent example of a multiple stress story. Coral reefs will not only be damaged by ocean acidification, but also by warmer waters and coastal pollution, including nitrogen runoff from adjacent lands. So what do we lose when coral reefs are damaged or destroyed? These magnificent ecosystems provide billions of dollars in services to society, including fish breeding habitats, tourism, and protection of coastlines from erosion during storms. Another key finding of our study is that there are thresholds in the climate system that we can expect to cross as climate continues to change. One example is illustrated in these maps of the Northwest. Cold water fish like trout generally can be found where the monthly average air temperature is cooler than about 70 degrees. Above this temperature threshold, the water becomes too warm for these fish to thrive. Projected average August temperatures for the 2020s and the 2040s suggest that the habitat for these fish is likely to decrease dramatically in the Columbia River Basin. Based on the 70-degree threshold, the areas shown on the map in shades of pink, orange, and red would become unsuitable habitat for the region's cold water fish over the coming decades. These kinds of thresholds are important to consider when thinking about climate change. Temperatures can rise a certain amount with very little effect, but then, if a particular threshold is crossed, the impacts can quickly become dramatic. Temperature thresholds can be an important part of multiple stress stories as well. For example, salmon have been under considerable stress in the Northwest because of dam building, logging, pollution, and overfishing. As a result, their populations are already at historically low levels. The additional stress of warming will make it difficult to restore depleted salmon populations. Another emerging issue that is discussed in the report is the interaction among climate change impacts. As we study the impacts of climate change on major systems such as water and energy, the importance of these interactions became apparent. Water is used for hydroelectric power production and for the cooling of power plants. As climate continues to change, water will become more scarce, especially in the hottest regions, and competition for water will increase. The competing uses include agriculture, industry, and household consumption. We have already seen the interdependence of water, energy, and climate becoming an issue in power plant permitting decisions, especially in the West. The demand for electricity will grow as the climate warms. This will be compounded by the fact that the U.S. population is increasing fastest in the hottest regions, where water is already scarce. While our report focuses on impacts of climate change in the U.S., it is hard to discuss impacts without beginning to think about what we can do in response. The responses fall into two main categories: mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation refers to various options for reducing the amount of climate change, for example, by reducing heat trapping emissions or increasing carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere. Strategies for reducing emissions include improving energy efficiency, using energy sources that don't produce carbon dioxide or produce less of it, and capturing and storing carbon dioxide emissions resulting from fossil fuel use. Adaptation refers to changes we make to improve our ability to cope with or avoid harmful impacts or take advantage of potential opportunities. Examples of adaptation strategies are presented in our report. When a new sewage treatment plant was being built on Deer Island in Boston, its height was raised to take sea level into account. A company can relocate its key business centers away from coastal areas vulnerable to sea level rise and hurricanes. Some states also prohibit building of any new permanent structures along the coastline. This allows wetlands to do what they would naturally do as sea level rises, which is to move further inland. A critical point to be made for all of us is that mitigation and adaptation are linked. More effective mitigation measures reduce the amount of climate change and therefore the need for adaptation, making adaptation less costly and more feasible. Now, the message has been given several times. It is clear that climate change is happening now. The observed climate changes we report are not opinions to be debated. They are facts to be dealt with. Another key conclusion of our work is that climate change is not just an environmental issue. It is about people, it is about us. We're already beginning to feel the effects of climate change in every region and across many aspects of society and the economy. These impacts are projected to grow with continued climate change. How severe these impacts will be is largely in our hands, determined by choices we make now and in the years to come. The good news, however, is that we can act now to avoid the worst impacts. Reducing heat-trapping pollution will reduce the amount of climate change and the severity of these impacts. Near-term action to reduce heat-trapping pollution increases our chances of avoiding many of the impacts we've discussed today. We can also pursue adaptation strategies to improve our ability to cope with the impacts that we cannot avoid. We've given you a sampling of the kinds of impacts that are already being observed and are projected for the future. The entire report is available online at globalchange.gov/US impacts. So with these opening statements, we'd like to answer some questions from the reporters in the room. I will be the MC, and I'm going to ask if the authors of the report who are with us today would sort of step up and stand up here with Tom and me, and we'll try to move your questions to the most appropriate person to provide you with an answer. Yes, first question. You, yeah.
Daily Environment Report. What changes were made from the April draft until now, and why is the report being released?
Excuse me, I didn't get the...
What changes were made from the April draft?
And there was a second part of it, sorry.
And why is the report being released now? Is there a specific...
Okay, what changes were made from the April draft and why is the report being released now? I'll answer the second one first. The report is being released now because it's finished. And we wanted to, many of us have other jobs, and we love doing this, but we wanted to get the report out as quickly as possible. What changes were made from the April draft? As you know, this process was a FACT process, open to the public. There were public comments. There were comments from our peers. The changes that were made were in response to either public comments or comments from peer reviewers.
Is there anything substantive?
Pardon?
Substantive changes, or were they grammatical ones?
There were, I don't know whether there were substantive changes. There were changes in phraseology. There were fixing of graphics that might have had an error in them. There was sharpening of wording where someone who had read it said, I don't quite understand this. Those are the kinds of changes that were made. The overall structure of the report has remained intact from the very beginning. Second question, I'll come to you as we go around. I'm just going to move around the room so I don't get confused. Sorry, Seth. Yes?
Alexander Duncan with Platts. This is a question for Dr. Holdren. You said that this report is specifically meant for state, local, and federal policymakers as we all realize the House is considering climate change legislation right now. Is it your hope that this report may change some votes for that bill?
Well, I would say, first of all, that this report is not about a particular policy or a particular piece of legislation. It is about the science that is telling us with ever greater clarity and persuasiveness why we need to act sooner rather than later, and why that action needs to include both measures to reduce the emissions of heat-trapping pollution that are driving this problem and measures to adapt to the part of climate change we can't avoid. With all that said, it is, of course, part of a larger process of public and policymaker education about what the science is telling us that one has to hope will contribute to how people think about specific legislative proposals and the need to move ahead smartly now after many years of dithering and delay.
Seth, sorry.
It's okay. I just thought I'd continue.
Yeah.
Seth Borenstein, AP. In the April 2009 third draft, page 12, key finding number 9, it says tipping points have already been reached and have led to large changes. That now reads thresholds will be crossed, leading to large changes in climate and ecosystem. One, there's a tense change there from something that has happened to something that will happen. And two, you change the phrase from tipping points, which has a whole different connotation than thresholds. If this were another administration, people would ask you, and I'm still asking you, was there political pressure on to changes? Why did you change the words to apparently water this down? Did this come from peers or did it come from the White House?
First of all, let me answer the middle part of the question. There was no political pressure for us to change anything in this report. This is about scientific integrity, and none of the authors would participate in that kind of a process. Secondly, I'm going to have Tom Carl talk a little bit about the tipping point issue, and then I'll follow up. Tom, do you want to make a comment?
The word thresholds was used because what we're trying to get across was that there is an issue to be understood with respect to irreversibility or reversibility. Thresholds can be crossed that could be reversible in the future, and Jerry talked about an example with stress on salmon at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That temperature, if reduced, that stress can be reduced, and a threshold can then be ameliorated. So we were trying to get across the notion that thresholds are important from the standpoint they may be crossed, they may not necessarily incite a tipping point, and tipping point would be more deliberative in terms of non-reversible, such as sea level inundation, and it's hard to recover land that's been inundated by sea level rise.
So are you saying we haven't reached any tipping points yet, that the third draft was wrong, and that's why it's changed, or are you saying?
No, we're saying we tried to provide more general context. There are some tipping points, as I mentioned, like sea level rise. When sea level does cross a threshold, it's very difficult to reverse that rise. So there are some tipping points that have already been crossed, and sea level rise is a good example.
Yes.
Right next to the circle here, Jeff Mason with Reuters. One thing that struck me from your presentation is the effect specifically on agriculture and energy sectors that you just mentioned. Do you have any specific recommendations on how those sectors should be changing with this knowledge in the next few years? And secondly, on a separate issue, you mentioned that this is using updated data that's different from what the IPCC had in its last report. How will you be sharing this, or how will this report be brought, I guess, together with the UN data?
On the first point about agriculture, the lead author on our agriculture section is a USDA scientist, and they are already thinking about the kinds of issues that were raised about agriculture. They are certainly complex issues, and they're quite dynamic issues. But I think that they are mindful of these kinds of issues and are working on solutions for these problems. Of course, the best solution is to reduce the rate of climate change and the amount of climate change as much as possible.
And the energy sector?
Energy sector is a very interesting sector where I think we need a great deal more research, especially on the interactions, the key interactions among energy, climate, and water. And I think water is going to be a tremendous challenge for the energy industry in the United States. And as I did mention, the siting of power plants is already being considered in the context of water scarcity in parts of this country. Yes?
Sorry, there's a question on the IPCC, how this report will be shared with the UN and the IPCC.
This report is going to be made widely publicly available. It will be online, of course. It will be published by Cambridge University Press. And one of the most obvious ways that it will be shared is that many of us are authors in IPCC as well as in this report. And so in our day-to-day business as scientists, this information will be freely passed among us. Yes? Oh, yeah, sorry. No, I missed her earlier, I believe, so sorry.
I was already mentioned that, this is a really critical time. There's legislation in Congress, and this is intended to be kind of an educational tool for local and federal officials. What's the method of getting this information to our federal officials, and what's that rollout look like, and what can we expect as far as, I guess, a real, concentrated effort to get this to people who are making decisions at this point in time?
The author team is actively working on briefings on the Hill. We had some yesterday. We'll have some tomorrow. And I assume that interactions will continue. Many of us are regularly in contact with staffers and, in some cases, principals on the Hill, and we'll work hard at doing that. I'm sure that all of the federal agencies, who are the owners of this report, by the way, that group of 13 agencies, will make every opportunity to move this report forward a key opportunity. Yes?
Yes, sir. Steve Davies with Endangered Species and Wetlands Report newsletter. You're projecting a continued increase in extreme weather, drought, heavy rain, or more intense hurricanes. You also noted in the report that higher temperatures can exacerbate already unhealthy levels of ground level ozone in metropolitan areas. Given both of those, I'm wondering, does it make sense to embrace massive tree planting programs as mitigation for climate change, given that they may not, trees may not respond well to drought, heavy downpours, and ozone has also been shown to cause damage to vegetation?
Very interesting question, and Tony Genados is going to be happy to give you an answer.
I guess the bottom line is that there are lots of proposals out there for what one might do to either reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases or to try to sequester carbon that's already in the atmosphere. One of the things for proposals like large tree planting programs is to really try to understand some of the pros and cons, some of the underlying science for how effective they might actually be. And part of the reason for doing these kinds of scientific assessments is to begin to lay the groundwork for doing exactly that. If we had large programs in places that we really did expect to become significantly drier or hotter, how reasonable would that be? We don't examine those specific proposals in this particular report. It really was not the intent of this particular report. But I think the literature and the body of knowledge that we draw on is in fact quite important for trying to understand those sorts of proposals.
Other questions from reporters in the room? Yes?
Yeah, Doyle Rice from USA Today. I think it's for Tom Carl. Did you say that the U.S. temperature has risen by 1.5 degrees in the last 50 years or the last 100 years? And how does that compare to global average temperature rise, and is that different from the IPCC findings?
The answer is yes and yes, and I don't mean to be trite, but temperatures have risen in the U.S. 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit over the last 50 years, but the same number is also appropriate for the last 100 years. And to explain that, what we had was relatively cool temperatures to start the century in the U.S. It warmed up in the 30s, then cooled down again in the late 50s and early 60s. So if you look at the rise in the last 50 years, the time over which we feel confident that we can attribute human activities to the change in climate, temperatures have risen 1.5 degrees in the U.S. And if you actually look at the U.S. temperature rise, it's not too much different than the global temperature rise at present.
Is that same as the IPCC finding?
For the global temperatures, it's the same as the IPCC findings. In fact, as you know, in the IPCC findings from the global temperature record, there's about 3 time series that are used, one from the UK Met Office, one from NASA, and one from NOAA, and they're all pretty much in the same agreement, and that's what we used here.
Yes.
Randy Shostak with EOS, the American Geophysical Union. Several speakers have said that it's not too late to act. But looking at this report, I'm wondering if you can say how depressed or concerned the speakers are, and how depressed or concerned should other people be, and also, have we crossed some sort of threshold in terms of the attention needed to adaptation instead of mitigation?
Don, do you want to? I'm trying to share the wealth here. This is Don Ruggles from the University of Illinois.
Thank you. I think that I remain optimistic that we can do something about this. We do need, I think what we've shown in this assessment is that we do need to act soon, sooner rather than later. And so that's an important part of the finding. Because we want to avoid the worst of the kind of changes that we looked at in looking at these different projections that we did, different scenarios. But I think I feel confident that we can do something about it, but we do need to really act soon.
Yes.
The reviewers, their reviews, are they public? Can you get a hold of them, the living reviewers of this report?
I believe in a FACET process, you can see everything, including my Stop and Shop bill, probably. But no, I think that's true. Yes, Seth.
Ornstein again. To follow up on Dr. Lovell's answer to Randy's question, you said we need to act soon, sooner rather than later. You've no doubt heard Jim Hansen talk many times, and others talk about the time frame. Where would you and perhaps others authors put the time frame at how much time is left to act to prevent the worst? Are we talking 5 years, 20 years, 10 years? How much time is left before you can prevent the worst? And which worst impacts are you talking about that are still preventable and which are not?
You want to start that, Jerry?
Yeah, okay, I'll start. To give you a date certain, as they say, is not possible. The idea is that this is a dynamic process. We know it is moving rapidly. The sooner we act, the better. And so, we cannot be definitive in that answer. What kinds of things would we like to avoid? My wife grew up in New Orleans. Would like to avoid seeing that coastal area of the United States devastated by sea level rise and storm surge. I think that would be a very good idea to avoid. I'd like to see distress in the world's food system. The United States is not isolated. Our food system is at probably less risk than a developing country on the equator, but clearly things that happen elsewhere around the world are going to affect us. I think there are a lot of things that we think are potentially possible if we don't bring climate change under control, and we'd like to see them avoided.
Oh, so, I mean, I know you can't give an exact number.
Yeah.
Are we talking in terms of handful of years, handful of decades, handful of generations? I mean, those are a large
Yeah.
enough time scale.
Yeah, well, I don't think I'm going to go there. You and I can talk about this maybe offline. Yeah.
Kate Shepherd up with First Magazine. We have one bill that's really got a lot of traction in Congress right now, the Weston Markey bill. In your opinion, the people who wrote this report about how we need to act now, is that bill sufficient to take the actions that are needed?
I'm not an expert on the Waxman-Markey bill. The idea that it's trying to move actions forward, I think, is a good thing. Yes?
One last thing. What comes next for CC, for the Climate Change Science Program? We've got this review out with IPCC. We had to turn around and start over again.
Tom, do you want to do this, or John, would you like to? You're probably the most appropriate person.
Well, we are in the process of looking at the structure and the opportunities for the climate change research program going forward. That includes the climate change, what has been called the climate change science program, and the climate change technology program. A lot of talented people there, a lot of work still to be done. Our intention is to actually increase the intensity and the focus in those efforts through this administration. And but I wouldn't want to go into more detail at this point on exactly what all the focuses will be.
Okay, Jane, do you want to respond? Yeah, we have about 2 more minutes, so we're going to close up. I'll take one more question, and then we have to move on.
On that question, I'm wondering if you can say whether the climate change science program and the USGCRP will be rolled together in some way, or are they now considered, or will be considered the same?
John, you?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes. It will. It really is all part of the same effort.
Okay, this is absolutely the last question.
Alexander Duncan with Potsdam. I'd like to get the panel's thoughts on the feasibility of carbon capture and storage. It's been talked about as a key mitigation tool by a lot of policymakers. There's a lot of political momentum behind it. What's the technological feasibility behind it?
From this report, we have no basis to make a comment. I don't know whether John would like to.
Yeah, I mean, I can comment on that. As you know, there's been a lot of study of CO2 capture and sequestration from fossil fuel burning power plants. Most of us believe that it's important that we make that work. And there's an awful lot of fossil fuel burned in power plants in this world. More is going to be burned. The United States, China, India, Australia are among the countries that have substantial coal reserves. A lot of that's going to get burned, and the question is how. Secretary Chu at the Department of Energy has resurrected the FutureGen project, which is a large-scale demonstration project in that domain. The Chinese are starting work on significant demonstration projects on CO2 capture and sequestration. My own judgment is it's a great challenge. It's not going to be cheap, but I think it's probably going to work. Been a lot of investigations of different geologic environments as candidates for sequestering large quantities of CO2. Some are better than others, but again, I think we're going to find a subset of those environments will be satisfactory for holding large quantities of CO2 for a very long time with low leak rates and high safety. What really remains to be seen is how inexpensive we can make this. One of the things that remains to be seen is whether we can succeed in approaches that will work economically in retrofit rather than only in new power plants. There's a lot of work left to be done, but I don't accept the proposition that this is too hard and that we're not going to be able to do it.
John, do you want to close out?
Yeah, I guess it is. Oh, Jane, you want to put a word in?
I just want to add to some of the comments that have been made that I really believe this report is a game changer. I think that much of the foot dragging in addressing climate change is a reflection of the perception that climate change is way down the road, it's in the future. and that it only affects remote parts of the planet. And this report provides the concrete scientific information that says unequivocally that climate change is happening now, and it's happening in our own backyards, and it affects the kinds of things people care about. So I think the dialogue is changing. This is science that will inform policymaking. It doesn't dictate any particular solution, but it says this is important, we need to act sooner rather than later, it affects you and the things you care about.
Thank you, Jane. I can't actually think of a better way to close than what Jane has just offered, and therefore I'm simply going to say thank you to all the authors who are here. Thank you to the authors that weren't here. Thank you to Susan Hessul, who did a lot of the editing work in producing this thing. And thank all of you for coming and giving this some attention. We appreciate all of your efforts. We look forward to reading the stories that the press folks in the room write. Thanks again.